How was your week?
It, how was it? It was good, wasn't it? Yes, it was busy. One of my kids is doing a rap camp, so there was a lot of me sitting in the library working while he was learning to rap. And I'm off to the Celsius convention in Spain next week.
And our first question arrived. Samurai Haiku asks, my players and I are enjoying the Borealis connection. I'm especially looking forward to Marcel segment. What specific elements do you focus on when designing a Fall of Delta Green scenario?
If I'm just doing one sort of in isolation, then I'm probably looking for a interesting historical event or character to hang stuff off. Yeah, I mean, really, it's looking for stuff that is uniquely folded green as opposed to something that could be done in either regular like trail slash call or modern day Delta green, like finding some sort of interesting aspect of the period. The other thing I sort of keep in mind is that the characters are a lot more, I mean, professional is possibly the wrong word for Delta green, but a lot more focused than in most other Cthulhu games, as in they're not amateurs, and unlike various forms of Delta green or like modern Delta green, they're not I like doing stuff off the books. This is like they've a degree of official backing. So like that was like one of the great bits of the weird fun with the Burroughs collection was basically weaving in possible support they could have from various aspects of the U.S. government and like the sort of different interest groups and factions that would involve. To agree with Burles, I had it easy because Ken did the outline. So basically, Ken just did all the research and said like, here are 30,000 things that might happen. Cram those in 12 pages. But yeah, for like stuff I did, like, what was the free RPG one? On a Bank by Moonlight, that was very much sort of like, taking period stuff and period concerns, that case, drugs, and working with that.
Let me ask you a question. Can you let us know what you are working on at the moment for Pelgrane Press?
Right this moment, I'm finishing off one of the backer scenarios for Trail Second Edition. I've got two of them done. If you are the third backer and you haven't yet responded to my emails, please do. That's been a very sort of interesting little challenge because basically the backers could like throw whatever ideas they want. So we've ended up with one scenario which is relatively conventional in structure. It's like you go in, you do an investigation, horrible things happen, and the other one is this, if it comes together, it was going to be this very, very strange improv heavy, but it's been great fun to do. What else have I been doing? They're the main two. I've been discussing some 30-day stuff I need to do with Rob and Cat, but we still haven't worked out exactly how that's going to be handled. And I've also been tapping away whenever I can on the Halfling murder game, which is Robin wants to call Foot Patrol. I still like shares out. We were throwing names back and forth on a weekly basis and trying to find the right one. But that working at that is just such a relaxing time compared to trail stuff because there's no research. It's just making nonsense up.
Next question is about Moria. Moria is magnificent in no small part due to amazing cartography. Can you talk about how it was bringing your narrative vision to the extraordinary maps and carto?
The Moria map, for those who haven't seen it, I can actually just lift my camera a bit. You can see, well, actually, you can't see it very well there, but rest assured it is glorious. Moria was for Free League. In that, there are two sets of maps. There's the main map of the city, and there are location maps. I sketched the location maps. I should really put some of them up because they are hilariously bad. Like my sketches are hilariously bad, and they've done these fantastic 3D maps from my sketches. Um, but the main map, I mean, that was like we gave some guidance to Francesco the cartographer, but really we sort of like we have no idea how you're going to do this. This is this like giant underground city. It needs to be simultaneously both insanely complicated and useful in play. Off you go, and he produced this absolutely gorgeous thing. I mean, that is one of the best parts of just working in the gaming industry. You can like as someone who has minimal art skills, no cartographic skills, to be able to sort of hand vague notions to someone actually competent and they will put things together is astounding.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, no, it was an absolute blessing, is the answer.
Was it simultaneously drawn or did you write it first and hand it over to cartographers?
It was mostly done long before the cartographer got involved, but also with like with Tolkien was licensed stuff because everything was like all the what am I trying to say? the core elements are defined by Tolkien. So, like, from the other rings, you can get, like, the scale, the width of the map, the two entrances, the mountains, so for like a lot of the Tolkien cartographies are pre-done, so just working around those established elements.
Yeah.
And then Moria is supposed to be this, like, flexible improvised things, so like the locations on the map can be moved around, or can, like, the map itself is sort of like a possibly untrustworthy handout. It's like, it's
Yeah.
my explanation for it is like, it's this map that was made after Moria fell, so locations on it might not be accurate.
There's a follow-up on this question. How would you leverage a good map simultaneously insanely complicated but useful in play for a Trail of Cthulhu, Fall of Delta Green, MBA, MCB scenario?
It would depend. I mean, it would very much depend on, like, either the scenario, on the setting and the scenario. Like, for fall, you could, like, do a sort do a like a hex crawl or something. I mean, part of the great thing with maps is you can have, like, GM and player facing maps, so you can have a much simpler GM approach where you just have, like, the important locations highlighted, and that the players have the fun. Like, I mean, like with Dracula Dossier in the Hawkins papers, there's this fantastic period map of London that we've then photoshopped a couple of other locations into. So you can actually go to that map and you can look at Carfax Abbey and so forth, and they're on there. It depends. I mean, I've been thinking a lot about maps lately. Like, one thing I want to do for the Hobbit murder game is give the players a detailed map of their village with little name tags, so basically they can build up simultaneously a roster of all the key NPCs, and also, like, spatial issues, like, who's living next to who. With a good map, you can almost have, like, sort of an extra channel of conversation in the game,
Yeah.
which is nice. Yeah, maps are underused, I think, certainly, as sort of like, ways to capture information, or capture evolving but persistent information in the game space, which is the most pretentious answer I've given in a while.
Do you think any of the published scenarios lend themselves to being run in the Cthulhu setting?
Cthulhu City sort of sprang out of a side reference in one of the Arkham Detective Tales scenarios. I mean, any sort of urban-ish, like, it's obviously anything set in Arkham and so forth, but anything urban should be able to be adapted fairly easily. I think one of the new backer scenarios will slot right in pretty much. I must have a look through. I mean, that's a page 6 article there to a degree of, like, what scenarios would work with it. I mean, anything urban should be able to use with it. Cthulhu City, I'm still very, very fond of and would love to do more with, but we shall see.
Let's talk about your book for Swords of the Serpentine. We are accepting playtests.
I believe so. The book is currently titled Pillars Built on Sand. It is a book of 5 adventures. The first 3 can sort of be used in any order, and they're each tied to one of the locations or one of the districts in Eversink. So basically, you can either, like, build connections to the campaign right into your into player characters, or they can be wandering through and they run into weirdness and get involved in the campaign that way. Then the first 3 you can run in order. The 4th and 5th are designed to run as part of a longer campaign. Overall, it does your fairly standard apocalyptic conspiracy with cults and weirdness and gods and monsters and swashbuckling and so forth.
Yeah.
But each scenario is designed to sort of show off a different style of play to a degree. So, like, one is very much about the sort of, like, swashbuckling on rooftops. There's a journey. There's a fairly traditional gumshoe murder mystery serial killer one, and there's another one which is all about this quarantine ship, and that's very much sort of like, sort of chess game of, like, move around trying to, like, sneak onto the quarantine ship without being spotted, and lots of factions having intrigue each other. I know that's been great fun to do and lovely to wander around Fantasy Venice for a bit.
I tried to play a few sessions on Eversync
Mhm.
for Swords of the Serpentine, and it was very good. Coleman asks, what do you consider the primary story as opposed to gameplay mechanics? Differentiators between NBA, Fall of Delta Green, and Trail of Cthulhu. What story beats and themes are core to these settings and set them apart from each other?
Trail is pretty much your default classic Cthulhu thing, where basically a bunch of relatively ordinary people in general go and discover some mystery, probably one that's been, like, either lying dormant or lurking, or certainly is not immediately impinging on the wider world, or if it is, working very much in the shadows. And they are driven by their drives. Yes, apparently they're driven by their drives, and the, like, talks about the GM to go in and investigate. But it's, in most trail games, the players are the ones pushing the investigation forward. They're the ones sort of intruding on the mystery. So the pacing, at least in the early parts of the scenario, are very much up to the players. For Fall, it's more mission based. The characters are handed here is a problem, go in, or here's a situation, go and investigate what's going on, which means you can drop them into more complicated scenarios or more sort of more complicated and multifaceted scenarios, because instead of building from one small mysterious hook, you're sort of dropped in the middle of the situation. It's time to start working things out. So, for example, there's one scenario in the Brothers Connection where you're sent in. There's this Radio Free Europe is broadcasting these weird messages. You're dropped in, and the safe house you're sent to the start had a group there previously. So it's there are 3 or 4 different facets of the mystery from the start. So you can sort of not so but provide with more fronts to investigate right from the beginning. And also because it's more mission, it can be more intense and high stakes from the start, as opposed to the slower ramp up of Trail. NBA, there's a strong argument, I think, that Night's Black Agents, even in a one shot, should feel like a campaign, in that with anything involving the mythos, humans are basically outside it. It's always this alien intrusion into our society, into how the world works. The vampires, though, are either formerly human or much more embedded in humanity. Their minions are much better to be human. They're not so much an alien intrusion. It is they're like the shadow government and so forth. So similarly, NBA characters tend to have much more of a history. They tend to have established networks of contacts and so forth. So NBA is always going to be much more about leveraging contacts, about betrayal, about backstories, about being basically being in a sort of spider's web, and you can pull certain strings and other things will entangle you. But the characters are much more embedded in context than Fall or Trail characters tend to be.
It's actually great distinction. I would guess the distinction that NBA is different from the others would be the mystery is working against you because it is active.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly much more cognizant of you. You'll never really get a NBA villain. Well, not rare, not impossible. The NBA villains are much more aware of their circumstances, like you. In a Trail game or Fallout Green, the mythos entity may have worshippers or cultists, or it may be aware, but it can also be this almost natural phenomenon. If you're investigating, say, a deep one colony, then a bunch of deep ones may not even really care about humanity or knows them. But NBA vampires will always be reactive. NBA is much more about the conspiracy pushing back on you, whereas in Cthulhu games, if things push back on you, they would just swat you and most of the surrounding countryside.
Samurai Haiku says Majestic shows up at the periphery in both on shore and Borellus as a very dangerous predator you don't want to mess with. Do you have any suggestions for creating a scenario where players play as Majestic agents?
I mean, the immediate shortcut is go download Ken's Moondust Men, and plenty of stuff in there for 1960s UFO hunting stuff. Wait, it depends on what they're doing as Majestic agents. Because low level Majestic staff are basically going to be just as clueless as regular Delta Green people, or they won't know about the various bargains that Majestic is making with the Greys and so forth. Have they made the bargains at this point? I can't recall what the Delta Green timeline is at this point, or off the top of my head. But yeah, basically, you're instead of investigating gribbly monsters, you're going to be investigating flying saucer crashes and alien weirdness, but with more money and backup and better stuff and nicer cars. If you want to play one where they're more clued in about Majestic and all its sinister machinations, how would you do that? To a degree, then you'd almost want to be sort of pulling back one level and doing a sort of game where you're like the Men in Black and reversing everything. And I didn't think about how to do that properly, but you could do a sort of we're the bad guys campaign there, but it would be tricky to do with Gumshoe, because you wouldn't be investigating. You'd be almost building the mystery for people to try to stop people from investigating. I mean, there's a whole design field of reverse Gumshoe, which I keep poking at it. Robert keeps telling me not to. Like I wanted at one point to do a Mythos bootleggers game where you're playing basically. Actually, chunks of the show up in Cthulhu City, where you're playing like Mythos bootleggers who are like deep ones trying to hide, and the investigative abilities are all swapped around. So instead of using investigative abilities to find clues, you're using investigative abilities to basically cover up your activities. But it's always
Actually,
remained just sort of hypothetical.
I can see an ocean game type of stuff from this, people asking for it, and we eventually deliver years later. CJ asks, I've spent the last year running a Mutant Steel Blues second edition game set in Dublin and run sessions at three conventions where players have loved the system. Do you have any plans for Mutant Steel Blues? Do you enjoy working on it? It remains my favorite gumshoe game, and I'm not a superheroes fan at all. I think that's best asked to Cat, actually.
So certainly in terms of future plans, I mean, I think basically it's open for community content, isn't it? At this point, so
Yeah,
so it's to a large degree, I think it's going to be left to fans and third parties, mysteries. I mean, do I do enjoy working on it. The Quaid diagram is an absolute work of genius. And actually, to sort of link back to a
yeah,
previous question, that's a fantastic example of using a complicated map in a
yeah,
scenario, because that's basically what the Quaid diagram is.
yeah,
And the fact that the players can do a large chunk of the investigation themselves at the table by basically going, aha, okay, these two crimes are far apart. They must be two different superheroes or two different supervillains. To a degree, the problem with MCB is the same as NBA in that because they're both set in the modern day, and the modern day is proving really, really, really unstable at the moment. For example, when we were doing Music Do Second Edition, that was around the same time that there was a huge shift against law enforcement, and the idea of playing cops was not going well with our fans, which is why part of the reason that the detective campaign frame was really pushed when we were doing that. Similarly for NBA, as I keep complaining, like the first something we did for NBA was the Zoltan Quartet, and that is now geographically fraught, given the opening part of that is in the Ukraine. Writing present day stuff at the moment is a shot in the dark because either you go super, super generic and go, it is in a city, in a place, insert your own details here, or you write some stuff and you risk it being outdated. Actually,
yeah.
Dublin would be fairly safe, given Ireland is remarkably, well, so far stable. Yes, actually, no. Given what happened in Ukraine after I wrote Zoltan Quartet, I'm not writing anything in Ireland. In the present day, it's just absolute folly.
The next question from Coleman. Which organization is more guilty of hubris? Majestic for thinking it can harness the unnatural, or Delta Green for thinking they can defeat it?
They're both massively hubristic. I would give the edge to Majestic in terms of hubris, because there are people in Delta Green, and more as the fall progresses and they realize what they're up against, who are going, we can't defeat it, but we can just sort of like hold the line for a little while by humanity one more day, as opposed to Majestic going, ha ha ha. Look at our new space friends. We're building the future here. Yeah, I think Majestic would take the crown there.
M asks, I'm starting Borello's Connection tomorrow. What tips do you have for running it?
The main ones are most of the scenarios are relatively self-contained. We've tried to flag the where there are connections to future ones. Because you read up on bad guy's name, I've just forgotten. It's been like 6 months writing the thing. I can't remember the bad guy's name. The evil drug alchemists. Read up on his minions, so you know basically what connections he's using. Keep the main thing as well is use Boiler, who's the PC's handler, as your mouthpiece and tool to shove the players around a bit to keep them on track. What else? And the other thing is because they're moving around a lot and it's a fairly far-flung campaign for their bonds, you'll need to sort of push those a bit more because like in a regular fall one set in the continental United States whatever, there's the whole downtime where the players basically go home and have the whole bunch of scenes and so forth. In this, because they're assigned to first the Far East, then Europe, you'll either want to transplant their families and connections over there, or have them make new bonds in their new base of operations, or have lots of like telephone conversations and occasionally bit of leave back home. Even though the campaign doesn't push the bond that much in the text, it's a good idea to do so as GM to sort of drive home the tragedy and so forth. Oh, and if you can kill up a character or bring him back as a soul cut ghost, that's awesome. So I want that to happen to someone.
Samurai Haiku asks, do you get any time to read for pleasure? What are you reading for inspirations these days?
One of the great things about role playing, working full time role playing, is you can all reading is useful at some level, and you sort of pick up anything and it'll fit in. What am I reading at the moment? I'm rereading The Third Policeman. Will Heinmarch recommended How Done It, which is this book of essays by members of the Detective Society, isn't it? Detection Club. So basically, it's essays on aspects of crime fiction by Agatha Christie on down. I was on holiday and I got 3 books on Irish folklore of birds, plants, and animals, which I'm sorting through and trying to find useful bits on. Oh, I should be getting a copy of Anna Smith Spark's second book, which is very weird fantasy, so forth. The first was A Sword of Golden Ashes, and it's just this weird Duranta-esque fantasy, which I'd be recommending to everyone. But yeah, I mean, there are many bookshelves. Not as many as can, but
What about films and series lately?
not a lot. I mean, Bluey doesn't count. And anytime I pick up my iPad, I get told to watch Bluey. Actually, Bluey possibly does count. Bluey's very good. No, I mean the sort of one thing watching TV recently was the new series of Taskmaster. I'm sort of very out of touch with films these days. Look at Ken Robbins' list and go, wow, that's where did you guys get the time? Oh yes, you don't have kids.
Let's move on to the next question. Some folks talk about a white whale campaign, one that you'd love to run but never had the right circumstances. Do you have one? Asks G.
I have a million white whale campaigns. I mean, I don't get to run. I don't get to game as much these days, half as much as I want to. Like at the moment, I'm playing. The only game I'm playing is a werewolf campaign of all things. Like one of my go-to, or one of my plans for the next couple of years has always been to run and play more stuff, but it's been hard to find time. Okay, my current white whale campaigns, if I wanted to go through them, I really wanted to have a go at Seven Part Pact, which is this crazy wizard game by Jay Dragon, which people have been talking about online, and I was reading and boggling at. I do want to do another run through Dracula Dossier at some point. I would love to play Masks just because I don't think I actually played through it. I played through a full campaign of Horror the Orient Express, but I've never done Masks. They're the ones that spring to mind, but Catch Me on Any Other Day and a million other things pop into my head. I would just want to game more, to be honest.
Moving on to the next question from B. First, there's a comment. Is it about a bicycle? Shout out to the third policeman.
For those unaware of the Third Policeman, it is this bizarre fantasy novel by the great Flann O'Brien, and there's this whole, I say, call it somewhere between a subplot or a running joke about the idea that because the bouncing of the bicycles, your molecules get interchanged with the molecules of a rider and a bicycle get interchanged. You people who are basically turning into weird bicycles and leaning on street corners and so forth. Anyway, it's a very strange book. That's wonderful. But go on.
But seriously, what would you adapt of your open game content from OGL Horror? Caveats about the OGL status notwithstanding.
I don't know. I should really go back to OGL Horror at some point. Actually, if I was going to do that, the first thing I would look at would be Five Evil, which is this new game from Handiwork Games, um, by Morgan Davies, friend of this parish, which is sort of the OGL Horror is a big part of its DNA as well, and it doesn't do a whole lot with investigation, but it's a very good at running this sort of running and screaming version of horror. So it's definitely worth a look at, especially if you're a 5e player. We look at OGL Horror. I can remember would not adapting the organization rules. So I was being mocked about people working out how many hit points the FBI had. I think I mean the best thing about OGL Horror, from what I recall, and it's been a long time since I wrote it, was just the organizing and planning of horror scenarios, which sort of feeds into Gumshoe. I mean, a lot. I mean, to a degree, a good horror scenario, especially a one shot, is almost like a haiku or something. It needs to have that sort of perfect opening line that grabs you. This like combination of freedom and inexorability that brings you on to the conclusion,
Yeah.
and it all needs to fit into 3 hours and 6 characters. And yeah, that's just there's a certain. I started out writing convention scenarios, and I'm still adore the former of the one shot.
Yeah.
And I think if anything's from OGL can be OGL Heart can be salvaged, it would be that thought.
Samurai Haiku says, not a question, just a statement. You are amazing, prolific, and consistently excellent. Thanks for all your work. I enjoy it tremendously. Any suggestions for staying so prolific? Okay, that's a question.
Well, firstly, that's far too kind. I mean, to a degree, it sort of feeds back to the earlier question about reading, where basically you just keep picking up new books, or if you're reading old books, then try and find something new and interesting in them each time. Um, I mean, the real trick to being prolific is just doing it full time and having a mortgage, because that really does motivate you to. Um, okay, more useful tricks really are the Pomodoro technique of just having a timer on your desk and basically going, okay, I will now focus and work for like 25 minutes or whatever. Um, Movement breaks, getting up and moving around. Never, and this is more like, something I should really remind myself. It's a lot easier to fix something once it's written as opposed to not writing it. So never sort of sit there. Even if you feel like you have no ideas, just start typing. Even
Yeah.
if you junk at all, to a degree, it is just about training yourself to produce the words in demand. I mean, the other very useful thing, which for me, is that because I had to do multiple projects on the go
Yeah.
at any time, either if I'm stuck on one, I can switch to another one, or I could be doing one, and while I'm doing that one, I get so worried about the other one I'm behind on that I get ideas for that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, basically, yes. Stress and self hate are very useful as well. How do I portray a villain monologue as a GM? Asks B Tavern. It depends on the villain. My general rule of thumb is to assume that I'm paying the villain a great deal of money and that they're being paid by some very expensive actor, because the longer the villain is quote unquote on screen, the bigger the chance that a fallible GM will screw things up and the villain will lose all their mystique. I have learned the hard way through spending ages building up my villains, and they come on screen, and I go, bad stuff will happen to you. So I try and basically keep villain monologues short and try and ensure the players can't easily interrupt them, or the villain can't screw up by having to roll dice or something. So a lot of the time, I will use villainous interlocutors, basically have like minions show up and or have the villain like appear on a screen, or like keep them away from the interaction with player characters, because basically player characters ruin everything that they touch. Also, the other thing is like you don't have avoid monologues where you can. Conversations are better, even if they are also like when they're arguing more prone to screwing up. At least their the level of interaction makes them more interesting, and you can also recover from the screw up. And the other thing is, I keep telling myself is to not use my regular villain voice. Or I had two villain voices that I overused. One was a demon, and the other was a creepy skeleton, and I used them too much in various games, and the players got to recognize them, and it became running jokes, and I stopped that. Anyway, CJ is asking about fiction. Is it replacing RPG writing? RPGs only commission work for hire, and fiction gets you much more recognition and royalties. It's not replacing RPG for me. It's currently it's I'm still doing more RPG writing than fiction. I have just a book came out in May. I've just got edits now for the one that will be out probably November of next year. It's not a very different environment, but it's a different environment. It does pay better probably in the long run if you're successful at it, but it's a lot easier to fill up one's calendar with paying role playing work than it is to fill up one's calendar with paying fiction. So I'm very, very happy at the moment to be able to to balance the two. But yeah, it's a weird, it's a very different environment in terms of the interaction with consumers. Like I love conversations like this where I get to sit down and talk with other RPG players, like pretty much like not only one on one, but like we're like everyone's on the same page. Everyone's like sort of a GM at the fictional coalface. Whereas with fiction, like, actually, the example I always give is if someone like buys a role playing campaign that I've written and they go, "Oh, this part doesn't work," I have no problem going, "Oh, sorry about that. Here are like six different solutions on how you could make that work for your group. Maybe like you drop this NPC. Have you tried like adjust the combat this way? Or you've forgotten this bit of the campaign you should be using just for that situation. I will help you fix your game
Yeah.
or try to help you." With fiction, you absolutely cannot go, "Oh, you misinterpreted this novel. Here, you will enjoy it much more if you put it with this mindset." There's much more a wall between writer and consumer, and I don't like it.
Yeah, you
Anyway,
cannot tweak chapters, right?
yeah, you can't respond to reviews. You can't just interact in the same way. There's
Yeah.
much more of a sort of, and also because the fiction field is so much bigger. Like a role playing book might, like a well known role playing book might get a handful of reviews. Novels can get like dozens slash hundreds, and it's just a very weird experience coming from
Yeah.
role playing line.
Also, you can publish erratas for RPG books if you made a mistake.
Well, I mean, you can do like second editions of books, but again, there because I'm published through a big publisher, I have no idea who over there I should be sending even these corrections to. I can send it into the maw of the machine and hope that someone notices.
What alternate optional house rules do you always use or enjoy in gumshoe games?
I mean, there's something I would always use. It would very much depend on what the game is and what I'm like the purpose of the session. Like there's a big difference between me trying to like test something for as a playtest where I want to stick through as much as I can versus just messing around with friends at home or at a con where basically I want to give people the experience of Gumshoe without necessarily sticking to the rules such as written. I would always be I would always be erring on the side of giving people nice benefits for clever vesting spends. I've been fiddling with some revised chase and contest rules, which will show up in the halfling game unless Rob makes take them out, or unless I find they don't work. But no, I mean the core essence of Gumshoe is so absurdly simple. Of like you always get the clues, spend these stuff for extra benefits. There's a bit of d6 rolling and point spending, but I mean it is a very very simple. I mean, systems possibly generous framework is might be a
Yeah.
more accurate summary.
I think it would be different from people to people. Like for your own friend group, you would use some rules always. And for like people that are new to the hobby, can be encountering a house rule that makes the game simpler or something. Do you have things like that?
One thing I would sometimes do is if people have spent a bunch of points on a durability test and they still fail, then I'd normally try and give them some like fictional or positional benefit, even if they have failed. So, like you spend 5 points of shooting on a bad guy and you still miss. Then I go, okay, you miss, but you've you darted forward into cover or something, as opposed to the player who just rolls and hopes they get a six.
Yeah.
Um, because one thing with gumshoe can be that there's spending points for no benefit on general tests,
Yeah.
because you can't with the rest of the ways you can just go, no, there's no spend to be made here, or you get that for free, or just go no, you can't do that. But generally it's possible to, and speaking of someone who has terrible dice luck, to sink points for no benefit. What else? I mean, I would also, if it was running action scene, I would certainly grab my copy of NBA off the shelf, even if it was running trail or something else, because
Yeah.
the combat rules from NBA and Esoterrorist book, wasn't it? Was the where a lot of them through combat first showed up? Yeah,
Yeah.
I, for a lot of things, you spend points and then spend X points for some fixed benefit and then roll is
Yeah.
often more rewarding to players than just spend points, hope you beat the difficulty level. That said, I'm using much more. I'm using the simpler approach in the
Yeah.
halfling games, so I can be hypocritical on this.
Next question is from Samurai Haiku. Any thoughts you'd like to share on terraforming Mars?
I probably shouldn't, given we're still in very sort of conceptual level of development. I would say that if we get a thing we're working at the moment right, we'll be very pleased, and it is a sort of a very interesting design challenge to solve if we manage to solve it. Basically, making boring stuff interesting would be the quick summary of it. But yeah, no, we need to knuckle down on that project once Trail is finally fully tucked away.
B asks, which fantasy author would you prefer to adapt to your favorite and or go-to RPG system? James Branch Cabell, Lord Dunsany, or William Morris? Is there another one in the public domain?
Ooh, James Branch Cable is always lovely, and I don't read half of his stuff. I mean, Morris. I mean, the only Morris books I've read are the Roots of the Mountains and House of the Wolflings, which are they're relatively easy to translate. You could do them in pretty any fantasy game with spears and spears and serious hairy men. Lord Dunsany. I'm trying to recall Dunsany's stories that are actually stories as opposed to these dreamlike bits of weirdness, which are lovely to do. And honestly, if I was going to of the three, if I was going to say, if someone said which would you grab, which would you build a system around, Dunstany would be the most sort of interesting design challenge. You could sort of start with some sort of fork off Nobilis and go from there maybe, or something, or some sort of very very narrative heavy post forge bit of nonsense. James Brandt's Cable, how would you do that? You'd almost want some sort of assertion thing, because basically, I mean, it's as long as it's about anything beyond, was Jurgen and what's the other one I have over there? The Fruits of Ambition, I think it's called. Basically, you got the bits where you've got characters who are radically different power levels. Like you've got this awesome wizard and this random Manuel the herd or whatever he was, and one can just say something and the other one agrees with that, and that sort of sets the bounds of the confrontation.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm babbling at this point. Try to think of all the public domain ones. Sure, they're out there. I'll think of it and go, it should have been so and so.
Coleman asks, do you think there are other board games that are readily adaptable to RPGs like Terraforming Mars? Any tips in general for adapting board games in general?
I suspect this is a question you'd be better to ask me in a few years, once I actually have having done it once. I think. I mean, the I love the combination of readily adaptable and terraforming Mars. Given we have found out it's not readily adaptable, we have to do a lot of thought about it, because I mean, you can easily convert a board game, which is like a classic, bunch of adventurers go in and so forth, and solve problems. Whereas more abstract game, high level game like Terraforming Mars, you have to sort of zero down or take a slice of it. For tips on adapting in general, I think a key is to identify the feel of the game in play as like what does it make you feel like where is the fun coming from, what story is playing in your head, and then try and work out how you can replicate that in the tabletop paradigm, which is generally going to be like one person saying here's the situation and the players describing their actions in response to it, which is could be a world away from how people work in board games. And to loop back to earlier bit, I think seven part pact is doing very interesting stuff there, which must get my head around at some point because that's basically combining board gaming and role playing. Done that often.
G asks, I've heard of a criticism of Gumshoe a couple of times that it's solving a problem that doesn't exist. That a properly designed mystery in any system is supposed to make sure all necessary clues are available. What's your response? I'd love to be able to bring the folks saying this around on the system.
The problem definitely does exist. Yeah, a proper design mystery should you do a proper mystery in any system. It such depends on that. I guess the key inside of Gumshoe is distinguishing between available and accessible, I guess, with the term, or not accessible like you, or what synonym am I looking for? Like saying a clue is that, God, we're in the debate about US healthcare, aren't we? We're basically we're going, oh, let's healthcare. Yes, are the clues affordable? Because like you can do a mystery where like I've played in games, in fact, where all the clues were there if the players had been quote unquote clever enough to figure them out.
Yeah.
As the GM had gone, okay, if they go here, they'll find this. If they go here, they'll find this. If they go here, they'll find this. If they do this, they'll find this, and that would get them to the confrontation. But because we were basically having to read the GM's mind on what those actions were, like yes, if we'd gone to the warehouse at night, we'd have seen that there were like vampires moving coffins or whatever. But that would be dependent on us as players. Not even me. I can't even recall if there were any clues we'd found that actually pointed that out to us. It would just be us basically taking that action to get that clue, even though there was no particular hint that was the action we were supposed to do. It's like pixel bitching in old point click adventures. Gumshoe doesn't just say the clues are available. It says here's a list of things you can do to get the clues, your investigative abilities.
Yeah.
And also it makes sure that the really important clues are basically handed to you, or the GM is told, like, these are the clues you must get. So you can use the Gumshoe philosophy in other games quite happily. Like you can like, go like you can core clues anywhere or any system. You can use the Gumshoe philosophy in any system. But the other virtue of Gumshoe is that it gives the players a very solid list of basically verbs to interrogate the world with in terms of investigative abilities.
Yeah.
So the players both have more options to pick as opposed to a game where there's only like six or 12 skills to gather clues with.
I believe Ken was asked the same question in a different wording, and he said you can use the gumshoe approach in any other system. Now I think that it's actually you people like you, Ken and Robin and Kevin and all the other amazing writers that we have that makes the gumshoe run so smoothly and successfully, I guess, because it's not the clues like if you get all the core clues, you don't always solve the problem or the mystery that well, that
Yeah,
satisfactorily, right? You
yeah.
will have to get the peripheral stuff as well to enjoy it more, and you provide that with gumshoe games.
Yeah, I mean, the core clues basically say you will never be stuck. You'll never go, oh, I don't know what we should do next. You always say, okay, here's what we should do next. And you'll always get to the end of the story.
Yeah.
The other clues people on the way will determine whether the end of the story is good or bad, whether you know
Yeah.
what actually was going on, or if it just be this series of weird events. I mean, there's always a tension in a role play scenario between what can be prepared in advance versus what evolves at the table.
Yeah.
And Gumshoe tries to sort of thread the needle between that by going, okay, these scenes will happen. The players will find these clues, and they will almost certainly find these other clues, and there are more clues that will be available, but not necessarily. There's no guarantee they'll find them.
Yeah.
I mean, when writing stars for any game, like not just Gumshoe, I always sort of mentally use this rule where I can guess what the players will do about 75% of cases.
Yeah.
There's another 20% of cases which are maybes, and there's a 5% of there's no chance that I predicted that. And basically, writing a scenario is just trying to get the gym as much support for that 90-95% of predictable stuff, and then a few tools to
Yeah.
get things back online if the players go off in a really unexpected direction.
Getting core clues gets you to Cthulhu, but the other clues lets you defeat him in a sense, right?
Yeah,
That's the gist of it. G says thanks.
indeed. I hope that babbling was semi-coherent. So yeah, I always type or think much better when typing than talking. I shouldn't talk.
B asks, what would it take for an updated edition to Lorefinder or for Pathfinder 2.0 and or D&D?
I think if we were doing it these days, we with Lore Finder we tried to sort of plug in a long list of investigative abilities, and I think these days it'd be much less of a rules changing book and more sort of a gumshoe philosophy in a nutshell thing. Because I think that the Lore Finder didn't thrive because if you had plugged in Lore Finder to your game, then you have to do conversion work for every other supplement as opposed to just doing a book of advice and saying, here's how to implement Gumshoe in D&D. Yeah, so I think we'd be hesitant to use it. The other thing, of course, is like we're doing 13th Age, and that's why we're sort of staying away from D&D and Pathfinder to a large degree.
Coleman asks, what is your favorite minigame or other novel mechanic you've seen used in TTRPGs like the Jenga mechanic in some games or the use of cards and poker chips in Deadlands, and what makes them effective as useful game additions rather than merely an exotic add-on?
For a long, long time, I didn't play any games with those sort of additions in there because for years I was playing with a friend of mine who's since passed away, who was in a wheelchair and didn't have like full use of his arms and so forth. So we couldn't play anything that involved him having like cards or dice or Jenga or something because it just wouldn't have been feasible at the table. So like there was a whole swathe of games that I never got a chance to play with properly. I mean, I think I think Dread is absolute genius in terms of tension building and in terms of just sheer simplicity. And that's the Jenga one. A lot of it is just either information management in that you have like these things to remind you of what you have, or an extra channel of communication. Um I don't see a huge virtue in. I mean, it's nice to have stuff at the table, and I think there's a value in having sort of ritual elements um, to the game stuff. I lost track of my answer entirely. But I think my answer would be because I had to stay away from that stuff for a good few years. I'm not an expert on what's out there to a degree, and I think to make them useful as game editions, they have to actually plug into the game as opposed to just being a substitute for what's on your character sheet. Like I love the idea of basically being able to push poker chips across the table to signal to the GM that you're escalating as opposed to like spending points or whatever the character sheet them down,
Yeah.
because that gives you another channel at the table where you can say speaking and saying like you're talking character and saying like this turn is big enough for the both of us, and you push the token or whatever across the table, because then you've got two channels of communication going on, and you've got the narrative voice channel and you've got the physical one. I think
Yeah.
anytime we can build extra channels into play um, it's good because then you've got more conceptual space to play with and more communication to build up the shared fictional world.
Yeah.
Um, CC wants to ask in about when design you RPG based on
It is a
Gumshoe,
similar
what levers
question.
keep yeah.
Uh,
What levers keep the system fresh and exciting? Gumshoe is very is virtue is that it's a simple system for doing complicated plots. It doesn't. I mean, if you're going to plug stuff into Gumshoe, then it's going to be plugged into the general ability / combat feel of things, which is a lot more open to experimentation and weirdness. I'm not sure how you would make the investigative stuff new and grabby. I mean, I guess the big advancement there was Armitage Files and the whole improvisational nature. Candles and timers is lovely. Countdown clocks are just basically marking on time. They're nice and they're simple, but I never saw them as a huge step forward. Um, Candles and timers again. It's like the Tower in Dread. It's a lovely and very atmospheric table. My worry would be that it can be limiting if you're doing it for more than it works really well for a one shot, but for a campaign we might need more flexibility. It's not necessarily as beneficial.
yeah.
Um, Honestly, what I really want, or the design space I would really love to look at is capturing information between sessions and because I mean, partly because at the moment I'm playing at the moment every like 2 weeks, and because we're all old and have busy lives, we're missing a lot of sessions even in those 2 weeks. So like we can go like a month or two between games, and I would love to discover a good way to capture the state of play between sessions
Yeah.
that doesn't involve like either writing everything down or what my Joe's solution is, which is like texting everyone my summary of the game session between sessions.
Can you make
Um,
your players do homework? Because I can't.
no, 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 never, never.
Yeah,
Un,
so
yeah,
I'm
unless
skeptical
you
about
disguise,
that idea.
yeah, yeah. Maybe we could disguise it somehow, but they tend to be very lazy.
We will be closing soon. Let's take the last questions. Sea Monster says a simple system for complicated plots. That's a great answer.
That I stole off. Like that's like in the opening fiction, the original Delta Green, they have that's a quote stolen from General Puzzle's name in his bunker.
G asks, what do you believe is the appropriate role for generative AI in RPG space? That's a tricky question.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It depends on what the RPG space is. Like, obviously, there's a huge difference between using it in your home game versus using it in commercial products versus using free products versus like using like image generators versus using text generators. And also, like, I mean, stuff changes like so quickly. Like John Hodgson did mass switches for Doggerland using AI art back when AI art would produce these fascinatingly weird, surreal images because it was all it could do, but it produced these stuff, like things that like you'd ask it for like a picture of a tree, and it wouldn't give you a tree; it would give you this weird up tree spirit that was useless as a picture of a tree, but fantastic if you were doing a game about tree spirits, which is what Mass Witches was. And then AI art was on in the duration, and suddenly it produces a perfect tree, but won't give you a weird fucked up tree spirit. And we did it all with puppets because he's
Yeah.
weird. I don't know. I don't think the technology is changing so quickly that I don't think there's a solid answer to it. I would certainly be very hesitant about using it for writing stuff, purely because I've seen studies that basically your writing muscles atrophy very very quickly if you're just getting free text.
Yeah.
I tried back at this. I tried at one point using one of the writing assist programs for my own stuff just to see what it was like, and I found it was useless because it did a bit of context window. So basically, I wrote a sample Cthulhu scenario for a convention. I went, right, what should happen next? And I said, oh, this might happen. And they're going, no, you just said like the guy who was murdered as the initial plot hook could show up and like say hi to the characters. They're like, no, he's dead. You've forgotten he's dead because I've written more than like
Yeah.
6 pages in this document, and your window is fairly small. But that was a few years ago, so the technology has probably moved on again since then. So yeah,
I
yeah,
think it's
obviously
different.
it might get potential. Yeah.
I think it's different if you are writing a book to sell or preparing for a game with friends, so that you can just offload some of the preparation as a DM on AI. That would be useful tool, but for writing a book, you would need a human mind.
I mean, I hope so. otherwise, otherwise the career change is the offing. But yeah, I don't think. Certainly, I haven't found it useful. Yes, or in the case where it's useful, not so useful, or not useful enough that I would advocate it.
Yeah.
But I mean, it is changing so quickly. Like, yeah, the summaries is one thing I have thought for me, like recording the session, which I might try and do sometime.
G says might help with summarizing if nothing else.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've also had people praising Google Notebook one and saying, "Oh, like, that's very useful for tracking stuff within big documents," but I haven't played with it.
I had to turn off my email auto complete feature on sentences because it was annoying that it would be completing my sentences before me, and most of the time it was creating different things from what I intended. Thank you very much, Gareth. It's
No,
been
at all.
great.
A pleasure. I hope that was again semi-cogent. But yeah,
It was awesome. Thank you very much. It is recorded, so you will find it on our YouTube channel soon.
content.
We have some things that are brewing as well. You might see them on the other platforms as well. Thank you very much everyone for attending to this AMA, and let's do it next time, maybe in a few months as well. And I think that should be in US time next time. Thank you very much everyone, and Gareth, see you in the next AMA.
Thank you all. Bye bye.
Bye bye.